First of all, Pastor Brady and Pastor Rowan, thank you each of you for taking the time to have a conversation about your experiences. And what I'll do is I'll speak to you, each of you, because I'm grateful to have relationship with both of you and to talk about your experiences. So, Pastor Brady, I'm going to start with you. So early on, when we started the Every Baby to One program at New Bethel Church, there was a couple opportunities that you had that you were asked to speak to how you felt initially when your oldest daughter had a child. And I think that is very significant because your response was not something that most people were expecting. So if you don't mind sharing, talking about that and the experience that you had with your wife, our First Lady.
Thank you so much, Broderick. And I do want to express my appreciation for Every Baby to One. I can say that you guys are making a difference, and I want to applaud your effort as you work here in the Kansas City metropolitan area. Of course, my wife and her husband were having their first child. It was about almost 2 years ago.
Your daughter and her husband.
Right, Amelia, she'll be 2 in, I'm sorry, but yes, Amelia will be 2 in August. And of course, when we first found out she was expecting my daughter Amaris, we were very excited, of course, elated. It's our first grandchild. But then for me, I became, of course, very concerned and prayerful because my wife and we lost our first child. Angela, my wife, is a nurse, and we were pretty much along in her pregnancy. And there were some issues with the baby. We had to have an emergency C-section, and unfortunately, the baby did not live. It was our first child. It was a boy. Thank God we've subsequently had 2 beautiful girls. So, of course, when we heard about Amaris expecting, immediately what came to my mind was hopefully the baby will be the baby will be born natural, it'll be strong, there'll be no issues, there'll be no problems. And in the back of my mind, even though I was very excited and of course, going through all of the preparation for a new grandbaby. My wife even dedicated a room for the baby. Still, I had that in the back of my mind concern because of the great letdown that I had, as well as my wife, in the miscarriage or the death of our first baby. So I expressed that in many of our sessions, and even when I had a chance to address a number of groups related to Every Baby to One, that was my concern. Thank God, and very fortunate, the baby was born well, no problems, no issues. She's very bright. She's brought great joy to our life. But that was my experience, that even through the issue, I was always concerned and prayerful and hopeful that everything was done right and that the baby would be born successful without any issues.
And Pastor Brady, if you would, I know you're still a very young man, but about the experience and what you all went through as a young couple, how that was received or not received, not only as an African-American couple in the health community, but also in the faith community with the loss of that child.
Well, first of all, I'm in my mid-60s. In fact, this year I'll get my Medicare card, and I'm very grateful for that. Finally, I'm able to get something back. But this occurred, of course, about 30-some years ago when we had the loss of our child. It was, of course, more devastating on my wife, and we did not have at that time what we would look at today like for professional counseling. And even in the faith community, We more or less prayed about it. We sought the Lord privately. But as I look back now, I feel that it would have been much better had we had professional counseling to help us go through that period. Sometimes in the faith community, a few decades ago, it was frowned upon or looked as a stigma if a person went to professional counseling as opposed to just trusting the Lord. Of course, in my pastorate, I'm very different. I encourage individuals to receive counseling, even grief counseling, and other things that, while I'm equipped to handle the spiritual aspect, I more than recognize that there are individuals who are trained, and that is their ministry to do personal counseling. So I hope that answers your question, Broderick. Of course, there was a lot of concern for us. People wanted to, of course, come and give condolences, but still with inside ourselves, especially my wife, there was this inner battle. And of course, when we had the second child, uh, there was always that on pins and needles. Hopefully this will not be something that repeats itself. And that's why as a grandparent, when we had Amelia come into the world, that was in the back of my mind. And again, I am ever so grateful that everything turned out all right.
And I'm going to come back to that because, you know, I love interacting with you and how transparent you are, not only with your experiences, but how willing you are to share that to help people understand that it doesn't just happen to the layperson, that it can happen to anyone. And even in your position at that time, you were in even then an elevated position, but still you had to go through, and how people interacted with you may not, although they meant well, been what was best for you and your wife. Pastor Rowan, you've recently now become a grandparent as well. Your grandchild was a few miles away, and you had the opportunity to be there in the birthing unit post the delivery of the child. And I'd like for you to speak to some of your experiences having initially been exposed to Every Baby to One prior to, and what you saw and where you are now.
Well, good evening, everyone. And to you, Pastor Brady, good to see you. And to all on the call. And my wife is here, but she may join in and share. I will tell you an interesting thing, that as soon as we walked into the hospital there, guess what I saw? I saw a very similar poster to what you guys have. And I was stunned. I was like, wow, they're talking about it here too. Every Baby to One. It was just kind of blew my mind to see it in the hospital there. I wasn't anticipating that. But our oldest son had his first child. He and his wife, Katie, had their first child. And they too experienced, Pastor Brady, the loss of the first child. So the news of them being pregnant with this baby, they were like you, just wanted to make sure and didn't want to excite everybody. But God blessed them with a very healthy little boy. He was 9 pounds, 9 pounds, 12 ounces, big fella. Nice big hand. He's just, wow. I got pictures right here. I'd show you, but that's okay. But nevertheless.
We're not going to get into the picture battle now.
Okay. All right. I just got some new ones right today. So,
but we don't want to go there because I would win.
I don't know. I get my phone out. That's all I got is just pictures on my phone.
See, I'm trying to hold both of y'all down because I know you.
And it was a grandson. So, I was just elated to the fact that his first child was a son and my first grandbaby was a boy. I had told everybody I wanted a girl because I got one sister and one wife, so I wanted somebody to spoil. But all that being said, I think it was after, and I read the letter, it was after the service at our church where I was talking to many of you about the way we raised our kids with my grandmother, their grandparents, and what we were learning in this process. It was very common for us to take the boys and lay them on the bed and put some pillows around them and go back to the house and go on about life. And every now and then go in there and make sure they were breathing. We didn't consider what I've learned here. I was surprised to see that my daughter-in-law had the right kind of night pajamas to put him in. They had prepared his room appropriately. So everything that you guys were talking about, they have put into practice. As a first-time grandparent, if I had not have seen what I saw, I pretty much guarantee you I would have just did what I did with them. Put some pillows, you know, I'd have been breaking every rule and probably not invited back to the house because why are we doing that? You know, let's put the baby, he'd be all right, you know. I think our baby slept on their bellies quite a bit, you know, not putting on the back, just didn't realize it. So one of the things I think is new grandparents who, in my generation, I'm a lot younger than Pastor Brady, a lot younger, not much probably, but I won't get my Medicaid card for a couple more years, Pastor. But we just kind of grew up with a way you raise your kids differently, different ways you would treat their illnesses, what you fed them, how you nurtured them was a little bit different than what I'm seeing today. So the Every Baby to One has taught me that when we get a chance to get up there in Indiana to see him, and I can expect their house to be totally different than what it was when I raised my two boys, when we raised our two sons.
Thank you, Pastor Rowan. And I'd like for both of you to answer this question. So again, each of you have dealt with trauma as it relates to a child being born. As faith leaders, how does this, how do you position yourselves as faith leaders to now speak to your congregants as it relates to how trauma is dealt with, particularly when it addresses infant mortality and birth of young ones, particularly with you, Pastor Rowan, with the loss of your first grandchild, and Pastor Brady with your loss. And I'll just share this, with the onset of our Every Baby to One program at New Bethel, we discovered that we had 16 women in our church who had lost children between 0 and 1. So here was something that was happening frequently within the church, but there was no conversation about it. So Pastor Brady, I'll start with you, and then I'll come to Pastor Rowan.
So again, specifically, Broderick, what's the question?
So how you position yourself as a faith leader to address your congregants as they are dealing, whether it's counseling, whether it's seeking professional advice, whether it's seeking peer counseling, what are the ways in which you are able to now, based on your experience, help people move through that path?
Of course, thank you. Again, and I'm with Pastor Rowan, our generation growing up did things much differently. We handled things differently, and even when it comes to tragedy, the main topic that we always were told was to pray about it, that the Lord would give you guidance and direction and help you to get through whatever the situation is. As a man of faith, first of all, I definitely believe in prayer, but just like what we're doing now with this pandemic, my position has been faith, but wisdom with faith. And we have to understand how we cannot neglect the science. Oftentimes, it is believed that people of faith are against science. I never was in that position. I feel true science and scripture really go hand in hand. And then we must, as faith believers and leaders, encourage us to look at science, the data, and even the technology, the information that is provided, even as we have with Every Baby to One. We have to look at that to see how can we better improve going in the future to minimize mortality and to minimize those having issues. So as a man of faith, I had to bring both wisdom along with the faith and encourage our congregants. That's why our church was one of the first churches to openly have this type of program, along with so many other events that we do, especially in the medical field. As you guys know, Wyandotte County has one of the worst health statistics in the county, with the leading hospital that's one of the best in the entire country. So we have at New Bethel specifically tried, and with our Community Development Corporation, specifically tried to look at how we can improve the life and living of our members, still with faith, but yet recognizing we must be working along with those that are specialists in these areas. So again, my approach is much different because now I'm looking to see how we can better receive information, data, statistics, just like we're doing in this coronavirus, using that and then saying how can I best be the leader of a congregation where my main concern is holistic, not just the spiritual side, but the solical as well as the flesh or the human side as well. So that's been my approach.
Thank you very much, Pastor. Pastor Rowan?
You're always good about putting me behind that great speaker and orator there. So let me let me say this, and Pastor Brady always touched on some very similar points. I think I'll start with the idea of the grief part. I think, as you said, we don't know how to handle grief. We internalize it and then we become closed off. And to have a child lost in any point of the pregnancy is a loss. And first thing you have to recognize it as a human being and life had been lost. And there's got to be a mourning and a grief period. How do we do that? I think what's been kind of not spoken about in the church is those others who have experienced it are not available to help those who are currently going through it, because we've never created a forum in which we know what we've been through. And I think it's good. I think someone said peer counseling or peer relationships. When you meet other people who have experienced the same thing and had subsequent children after the loss of the first one. Since our son and daughter-in-law were away from us, she happened to be the youngest of 4 girls, and everybody around her had kids. So she came from a big family, so babies everywhere. So that the loss of that first one, I know it took a lot on Dory and I not to be able to be physically there. We definitely prayed and sought, but we thank the good Lord that now they're proud parents. So I think one of the challenges is having people open and share their testimony. I think every baby to one allows that form to be done in a way which would be helpful to others in the congregation. We don't have an overabundance of babies in our congregation. We have some young mothers who have not experienced anything as we've discussed here. So I think it's important to use, as you said, Pastor Brady, the data, statistics, and make sure you have a cadre of people. You know, one of the things I take pride in, Broderick, and all is, I remember my seminary class, I can only go so far. And then I need somebody else to take you the rest of the way. And I think we have failed in a lot of ways of not recognizing where we end and another begins together in ministry to bring the holistic approach to wellness, not just only physically, but also spiritually. So I think it's critical to have that. And what I like about every baby to one, not only that I like the little sandwiches we had after morning worship, but what I appreciated about it was I was talking to, I think it was you, Dr. Green, about the whole new concept of raising babies. And maybe I was just set back because it was so different than what we had done. And I think what happens is we have a lot of young mothers, maybe young parents, who their only exposure has been how they were raised and what grandma did, and, you know, and all the stuff grandma said, don't worry about it, it'll be okay. Where, you know, maybe you should have taken it. We took our son, our firstborn, to the doctor so much. When the second one came, I said, he'll be all right. Just give him some 7-Up. He just got a little upset stomach. I didn't, you know, buying all that Pedialyte and everything. If that's all it took to wake him up, I mean, put some water in that 7-Up. But I say that to say that we just don't know what's current. And that's why we need partnerships with this group here to bring to our attention. As you said, Pastor Brady, it's kind of sad in Wyandotte County to have the statistics we do. That our grocery store will be opening end of July, mid-July, up the street there from both our churches. So now we'll be able to have healthier food readily available versus having the kids eat French fries from McDonald's, sucking on the French fry with all that salt, and not having a nourishing meal. So prenatal care is important too. One of our doctors in our church has said this, and I believe him: trauma begins in the womb. And when he made that statement, we all looked at him, and then he spoke about it. And after that session was over, I realized what he meant. Trauma begins in the womb. So I think it's important that we have all of that.
Thank you, Pastor Rowan. And here's the last question. I'll start with you, Pastor Rowan. So both Pastor Rowan and Pastor Brady, you all each have very young members who have had children, some who are married, some who are single. And so how have you been able to communicate with those young mothers and or fathers? Because I know that there is a challenge with what the young parents believe, what the maybe a little older grandparents believe, and then in many cases, great-grandparents. And how are you able to navigate for those young parents who may have questions to you as their pastor and how to navigate childbearing?
Well, I've been blessed to have not only Melissa, whose face is showing here, a nurse in our church, Sister Renee Ellis, and she seems to be our Dr. Welby. She knows the health conditions just about everybody in the church. So in a lot of cases, I utilize those types of expertise to talk about the medical side of it all, what you could be experiencing, what could be going on. So far, the young babies we have are very healthy. She's engaged a lot with them individuals to let them know what they should and shouldn't do. In a lot of ways, Broderick, I just say, wait a minute, give me Sister Ellis in here to answer this, because I don't want to say it wrong. So I've been blessed to have that kind of support. And I think it's really good. And she has a heart of spirit to want to do that, along with Dr. Hall, who's a retired physician there as well. But Renee has been a great resource for me, and to let the parents understand what the prescription is, why it's important, and so forth. So that I've been blessed in that respect.
Thank you, Pastor Rowan. Pastor Brady?
Well, again, like with Pastor Rowan, my good friend, we too have been blessed in our congregation with a number who are in the medical field. In fact, Broderick is over our health and wellness ministry. But again, as I mentioned, my wife is a nurse. And what I shared about my concern with my granddaughter being born, believe it or not, I have that same trepidation with every one of my members who become pregnant. And my prayer is, Lord, let that baby be blessed and let that pregnancy be successful. I do that with every member. We've been blessed with a number of young people, and many are having babies. We just had a family that had twins. My wife and I, we went out and bought groceries for them in the middle of the winter and took them by their home. On another instance, there was a family and she was at a high risk level of pregnancy. My wife stood with her the whole time and was there even at the time of delivery to ensure that everything went well. And that's not just my wife, but the entire church family. So again, I have that same concern with everyone. And just like Pastor Rowan, take a personal interest that, yes, I'm excited that you're about to have a child. And unfortunately, we do have instances where sometimes there is not a married spouse involved, but we never put that person or make them feel as if they're something as a castaway. We embrace them, embrace the pregnancy, because that child still needs loving in every situation. In fact, in a couple of weeks, we're going to still have a baby blessing. I still believe that babies need to be blessed and prayed over. So we're doing something with safe distancing, because if babies ever needed prayer and support, they sure do need it now. But that's how I handle it. I look at every case individually. We rejoice when they do have the baby, but through the entire process. And again, that's why I applaud every baby to one, because once the baby's born, we want to see every one of our babies reach year one without any incidents. And so far, thank the Lord, that has happened. So thank you again.
Thank you both, Pastors Rowan and Brady, for your insight, your input, and your willingness to share your experiences.